website, anything that would be hosted on a server. Okay, and the VHDs on which these particular servers or virtual machines are running goes and stores in a Azure Storage. Okay, so there are you would have heard a lot of kind of outages. Okay, network outages, or a lot of Azure outages which had happened in the past. Okay, it's actually pretty common with cloud providers that this outages happens, and when it happens, it actually affects huge global customers. Okay, so most of the Azure the outages which had happened in the past, either they would be they would be due to a manual intervention, okay, due to a manual flaw, or like some patch updates or something he would have done on network, or he would have done a wrong patch update on a storage. Those kind of human flaws would have caused Azure outage, or the Azure outage was usually caused by storages, underlying storages, the Azure storage, the version 1 of storage which was there on which was supporting Azure. Okay, so why? Because when a calls gets triggered from ARM, okay, so basically the Azure storage, the classic storage which was made, and it was meant to be the call meant to take up load, which take up load of the calls, like creation of resources like VMs or websites or anything from ASM portal, the classic portal. Okay, it's not expected to take up load from ARM portal, because ASM portal, right, it's sequential workflows happen, sequential creation or sequential deletion of resource happens via ASM, but with ARM it's asynchronous. Okay, when you do something with asynchronous, then you can trigger thousands of 10,000s of calls on a storage account. Okay, so which actually what happens, if you remember a diagram which we discussed, like how exactly your VM and the VHD is stored in a, your VM cluster is somewhere else and your storage cluster is somewhere else. If you have saw that diagram, fabric controller, that particular diagram, just visualize it. Okay, you can check that in module 1 as well. Okay, and like your VM compute is in other cluster and storage in other cluster. Okay, so when asynchronous calls comes, like 10,000s of calls are coming to your storage as well, so what happens is like the storage gets throttled. Okay, because the network from via which that particular traffic should come is a common. Okay, inside a rack server, they right, there's something called as tor switch. Okay, all of the traffic which need to come to the Azure storage cluster should come via that particular tor. So it can sometimes load up the tor, it can coagulate the tor switch, or it can jam all the traffic which is coming in, and which causes latency in the response. If a user had created a virtual machine, it would take around 45 to 2 hours, or it may not happen, ultimately it will fail. Okay, so those kind of issues which had happened with this Azure storage, that particular Azure storage being a classic one, instead of supporting a new compute layer which we had, the ARM layer which we had on classic, instead of the ARM kind of storage, or V1 kind of storage. So now the people had bought up V1 kind of storage, so now it's pretty stable, and the main outages are not happening due to storage right now. So storage supports a lot of different things. Okay, so storage is for virtual machines. When I say about disks, so these disks can be secondary disks, or can be VHDs itself. Okay, or can be the OS disks itself. Okay, so OS disks or VHDs are one and the same, and there are secondary disks. So those would be secondary disks, would also be persisted on storage. Okay, and we have something called as file share server also we can create, right? I have shown you in the previous session. File share servers also we can store on storage. Okay, so which is related to virtual machine, and it's on storage as well. And we have something other kind of services also on storage, is some kind of unstructured data you can actually store on Azure storage. Okay, so when I say about unstructured data, is like if you say that you have in SQL DB or somewhere, or MySQL, anywhere, if you have something called as think of a employee table. Okay, so employee table may have can have 5 columns, okay, and can have millions of rows, okay. But once you created a employee table in a SQL, and it can only be 5 columns, it can't increase from 5 columns to 6 columns, okay. So 5 columns can have different type of property like employee ID, employee name, employee designation, or employee and employee competency, and employee rating or some stuff, or employee phone number, okay. So these 5 columns cannot be increased while that particular table is having a data, okay. But when it comes to unstructured data, you should be able to push up a lot of properties. You should not be bind up with only a single like five number of properties. If tomorrow I want an extra property, something called as I may have email ID property for the employee, then I should be able to add one more column without dropping the table, employee table, from the MySQL or MySQL databases, okay. So this kind of the data which is not having a proper format, or it can expand with the time, okay. So that is called as unstructured data, okay. So but when you go with the relational data, then you actually can't increase the columns at any moment. You need to drop the table, and then you need to create a new table with same table with another property, sixth property in it as well, okay. So that's what is unstructured data, okay. So unstructured data, you can these unstructured data can be of any type, okay. They can be like my employee table properties, or they can be like my video file, or can image file, or any other file, okay. And so blobs are that's what, like you store any kind of data, and you store that into particular container called as blobs, okay. So Azure blobs, we say that. And these are these can be interacted with REST APIs as well, or partial APIs, or anything. Ultimately it would be JSON, and it can interact. You can store the data, like you can store huge number of HD high definition files, like it can be MP4, MP3, or MPEG, or anything else, okay. And one more interesting thing is, like when the whole world is moving towards big data, so Azure had come up with supporting tools which actually work on big data, okay. And they have built up something called as Hadoop, okay. Something called as HDInsghts, okay. So what exactly HDInsghts would do is, like, it would roll up service, and it would create Hadoop clusters, okay. Number of Hadoop clusters. These particular Hadoop clusters can consume lot of raw data, okay. So right, what is big data? Big data is like you grab up a lot of details from lot of different sources. Like Archana is working on IoTs, okay, IoT kind of project, where actually they would be procuring lot amount or bigger amount of data, and then they would be pushing onto some storage, okay. But that particular data comes from various different devices. It can be a simple like microcontroller, and a call would be a simple code. It would be written to to the big data repository, or it can be like devices, intelligent devices fit onto a Ford a car, and the messages come from the car, and which can be a bit complex message as well. That also fits and goes into big data repository, okay. So irrespective of what kind of data which is there on a big data repository, okay, and we have that particular different kind of data, which big data which are stored at Azure, and the service which we give is data lake, okay. So inside the data lake, we have humorous and different kind of raw data which gets pushed and sits on it, okay. And from the data lake, we have Hadoop clusters on it, okay, which we create using HDInsghts, okay. So these Hadoop clusters consume on this lot of datas on this data lake. Lot of data which gets pushed onto data lake would be read by Hadoop clusters, and then and then HDInsghts, what it do is, like, it fetch ups or makes up beautiful reports of that particular data which is which will be read by Hadoop clusters. So that's what is data lake store. And we have something called as structured data as well. Okay, so structured data, when I say, like, it would be like it will have a key value pairs. Okay, in a table it can be like a simple table. Okay, and you can actually store basic table kind of structure, like in SQL, right? Like you have structured data, structured and relational data. Okay, so what happens with the structured data is like you have a specific format, and you can go and read that particular format or write into that particular tables or any repo. Okay, so basically they are table kind of structure. Okay, the same structure, like this particular structure data on Azure Storage, is something called as, we call it as tables. So tables are key value pairs. It has a primary key and a secondary key, and I'll show up how these tables looks up. Okay. And there's something called as these particular table store which is there, right? It can auto scale, and it's on Azure, right? It can auto scale, and it can actually, it's a NoSQL store. It doesn't have relational data in it. Okay, you can't make something called as a foreign key on it and then map it to different tables, or concatenate, or do some join operations on them. It's not possible. It just a relay, like a structured data would be there, and you will have a table, set of tables you can create, which will have, expandable properties also. You can do that, and you just read the data from these tables. And since there are a lot of internal techniques which has been used underlying this storage, these tables, like there are shading techniques and other techniques which are there, which actually helps in retrieving your data, like a less performance than a SQL store, but it has great performance, even if it stands as a NoSQL store. And we have something called as document DB, and in April 2017, this year, they had actually named this particular document DB into Azure Cosmos DB. Okay, this is also same NoSQL document DB. It's a planet scale or global scale database services. Okay, and you have NoSQL document database service, which is available across the world and whole of the DCs, and available in CDNs as well. Okay, and we have another thing as, like when you talk about SQL and structured data, like SQL have structured and relational data, right? So it's one of the structured data which we have is Azure SQL DB. Okay, it's the same version of a SQL Server on-prem which you are using right now. It's on Azure. It's sort of PaaS version of it, and it's a fully managed database as a service built on SQL. Okay, so it's a PaaS service, Azure SQL DB. There's something called as SQL on Azure is also there. Okay, when you talk about SQL on Azure, that would be IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service from Azure. And when you talk about Azure SQL DB, okay, it would be PaaS. So this was, I was talking about the data lake, Microsoft Azure Data Lake. So you can see that various different type of data comes and sits in a data lake. It can be from your line of business applications, or it can be from devices, or it can be your social tweets. It can be any videos or YouTube's comments, everything, or it can be results from web, or it can be sensors which are giving out the details, or the relational databases, or stream analytics, anything. So once you have data into raw data into a data lake, you can actually consume using HDInsghts, which is a Microsoft service. And using HDInsghts, you can build a beautiful report, and you can analyze on the data how exactly, what exactly your purpose, and what kind of messages are getting pushed into data lake. Okay, and there are a lot of open source or other compatibility, other versions of tools are also adaptable on the data lake, like CloudEra, HotMworks, or Revolution Analytics. You can use their particular tools for do analysis on your raw data, big data, which is available in your data lake. So one of the interesting thing, like it's very easy to create up a storage account. Okay, you would have saw this huge number of times when we were creating VM, but let's go and fire up a VM. So this is the classic portal travel, and or the ASM technique. By I mean, whatever cause you're gonna trigger from this would use an ASM technique, and whatever resources you're gonna create from the new portal, that is this portal, portal.azure.com, it will create calls via ARM. Okay, let's go. So we have worked on compute, networking, and let's go on storage today. So you can see that storage account have blob, file, table, queue, and we were discussing about the categories of like what we have is storage type. So you can see that storage account is there. You have data lake store as a different thing, and you have for OMS backup and site recovery, and even have you have softness as well. Okay, so let's go and create our storage account. So whenever you create a storage account, right, you would be giving the names, and it would take only lowercase, it won't take an uppercase. Where should I? So you can create via classic or resource manager. Yes, you don't want to, part of those outages, don't select classic, use resource manager. And then you have something called a general purpose and blob storage. So when you select a general purpose, right, it provides you all like blobs, files, tables, and queues. Okay, it's not specific to a blob kind of storage. So when you select a blob kind of storage, right, the blob kind of storage, is specific to storing, like if you want to store something called as a video or a video kind of data or huge set of data, like large files, or where you need to access that particular data very frequently. Like if you say an example of VHDs, and I say about VHDs, which VHDs are used by virtual machines, right? So virtual machine continuously read from VHDs, which means that VHDs goes and sit into a blob storage. Okay, so when it goes and sits onto a blob storage, so you need to have a dedicated performance on that particular storage. If you don't have a dedicated performance with that particular storage or the blob storage you select, so you may find that your virtual machine gets hung sometimes. Okay, so for that, if you're going to store, that what kind of data you're going to store. If it's frequently accessed data kind of VHDs you're going to store, go ahead and create a blob storage. Okay, and then map this particular storage to any of the virtual machine which you're going to create, so it will store its VHD in this particular blob storage. So if you select any other than this general purpose, you will have something called as tables, queues, blobs, and file storage as well. Okay, with the general purpose, you can select standard or premium. Premium is SSD. Okay, and premium has LRS, locally redundant storage, and premium, I think premium can't or doesn't have a replication. Premium kind of storage is like if you select a standard storage, it's normal hard disk. If you select a premium, it's solid state drives. Okay, solid state drives are costlier, they are faster, their performance made, and they can't span actually across a data center. They are just locally redundant, which means that it would have a 3 copy of a storage. Okay, whatever storage account you create, the data would be copied into 3 different locations in a same DC. Can't span across a DC. But when you select the standard type of resource, right, you have 4 different options: ZRS, LRS, GRS, and RA-GRS. Okay, so we will talk about this all different types. And storage service encryption, yes, in order to make you don't want to mess up with some Bitcoin kind of hacks or proposals. You would be interested to go and encrypt your data which is at rest. So whatever data which actually gets stored onto your drives or onto this particular storage account, you can encrypt it. You can encrypt it using the most of they have typed with lot of different antivirus and malware companies, which actually encrypt your data and saves it. And if you want to enable secure transfer, Okay, you are open, and so what it do is like it would like kind of in Linux kind of console, right, where you have an assembly client from where only you can actually copy your data, okay, which makes it secure. But if I put things on rest, then there may be a interference of hackers putting on their data on top of it as well. Okay, and then you subscribe whatever subscription you have, you select, and then you create a new resource group, create strategy. You can put into South Central US anywhere. It's great. So creation of storage doesn't take much of your time. If you're selecting performance or SSD storage or premium storage, yeah, that would take a little bit time rather than the normal one or the standard one. Okay, so the storage would be appearing any moment. And let's go back to the slides. So these are the characteristics which we have talked about it. And like I've said about standard and premium storage, right, it's the same thing. And you need to understand something called as hot and cool as well. Okay, so we have, when you select a premium tier, you will have something called as hot access tier or cool access tier. Okay, so hot access tier is like the tier which actually which you want to consider, or if you're selecting a blob storage account and you select a hot access tier, then it would be more performance based. What it do is like it would be, sorry, the data whatever you stored in this particular blob storage account, right, if you opted for a hot access tier, it would be more of performance based, and the data which you're gonna store, that that particular data going to be retrieved very frequently. Okay, in that cases you have this hot access tier enabled on it. Maybe the pricing is a bit different for a hot access tier and cool access tier. And once you enable hot access tier, it just depends upon it's performance based, so you won't be putting up large amount of chunk of data which is unused or not frequently used as well. Okay, rather you would be interested in storing something called as session data, application session data, or the VHD itself. Okay, so in case of cool access tier, what you have is you store data which is actually less frequently used, and you are okay if even if the data in it getting accessed even for 1 month or that kind of uh, type of data you would be interested in storing in storing in blob storage account, selecting cool access tab. So Azure Storage Services are like, we talked about blob storage, right? So blob storage are two types. One is page blob and block blob. Okay, so this is complete Azure Storage structure as of now. So storage account, once I create a storage account, right? I created a storage account here. Call as the Azure staging. Okay, so when I create this particular storage account, you have various type of data, like you have blobs, files, tables, queues. Since we selected general purpose storage account, okay, so when you select when you create a storage account, it will have a container. Okay, and so whatever blobs you have in here, right, blobs. So blobs are part of container. Okay, container is again a logical grouping. Okay, you have container, you have table, you have queues, and you have file shares. So containers, blobs are part of containers, and entities or properties of a table, okay, like employee table properties are there, and they are part of a table, and messages are part of queue, and directories or files are part of file share. Okay, so these are all kind of categories which we have. So blob storage is also known as object storage because you can store any kind of object in it, like whether it's a video file or any kind of extensions, you can go ahead and store it. Okay, and so table storage are NoSQL, we talked about. Queue storage are the same, and big queues storage are same, like the queues, how they work. Like you can put up some messages onto the queue, and you can let other particular processes to read from that particular queue, and if time expires, then that particular message would be deleted from the queue. Okay, and we have something called as file storage, which is similar to file share, which you have in your local as well. You would have access something like // file share, while like you would be setting up some softwares in your internal projects or somewhere in your in your domain. So that particular file service also you can create on Azure Storage. So going to our next slides is it talk about the same, like how do you plan your Azure standard storage, and how do you go for a choice whether blob storage or table or queue or file. It just depends upon what your applications or what kind of data your applications are going to store. That is done, you have something called as replication options. So as I was saying that when I talk about replication is that whatever data which is there in your storage account, it's actually copied into 3 different locations. Okay, it's 3 or more different locations. Okay, when you select LRS or locally redundant storage, it maintains 3 copies of your data. Okay, and your data is replicated 3 times within a single data center or single data center facility in a single region. So performance based or SSDs are LRS only. They're supported with LRS. They can store only the data in a single data center. So when you go with the ZRS, when you enable your storage account with ZRS or zone redundant storage, it would maintain 3 copies of your data, but this data is replicated 3 times across 2 or 3 different facilities or DCs. It can be within a single region or across 2 regions. Okay, it would be splitting your data into 3 different data centers. Like it can be 3 different DCs, or it can be 2 different DCs in a single region and 1 different DC in another region. Something called as geo-redundant storage. Okay, so GRS it maintains 6 copies of your data. So that is replicated 3 times across data centers within the primary region. So primary region is the region which you would have selected when you would have created. Like here we have used South Central US for creating the storage account, right? So that would be my primary region, and any other location apart from the South Central US would be a second region where it would maintain 3 different copies again. And this particular data center, like if a primary is in South Central US, obviously the secondary going to sit apart from this particular region. It can be in East US or in South India or anywhere else. We have something called as read access geo-redundant storage or RA-GRS, okay, which maintains 6 copies of your data. So data is replicated across data DCs to a secondary geographic location. Also provides read access to your data in the secondary location. So what happens is when you go with something called as SQL Server always on kind of concepts, where you have SQL Server setup, and that also set up with 2 different SQL servers you would be having. One is primary and another one is secondary. Okay, in that cases you need to select RA-GRS, because like in those cases what you're gonna do is like you're gonna write everything data onto your primary, and in case of disaster recoveries you can actually go and fetch your data in your secondary and make it on, or you can fetch the data or read the data from the secondary region, geographic region, and then put up or copy the data into a new location, and then you are ready. Your SQL is on. One more thing is like Azure Storage Billing. When we talk about billing, the billing is on the amount of data which is transferred. Okay, so the amount of bandwidth which is used, or the data billed only on data egress, or the data which is going out of the storage account. Okay, transfer of data between Azure service in the same region is not billed. Okay, if you go across region, then it would be using express route to to push your data to another region. That's why you will be charged with some amount for this particular transfers. And transactions, if you do some transactions against a storage account, it comprises a cost. And storage use, if you're storing a huge amount of data, this is another parameter on which you will be charged. Okay, if transactions are high, you'll be charged. If you're using huge amount of bandwidth, you'll be charged. Or the egress, or you're reading a lot of data from your storage account, you'll be charged. Okay, and billable versus non-billable is so every request which you make to account storage is either billable or non-billable. We have different characteristics which Azure categorizes them, and So creation of storage account I have shown up already. So one particular catch is with GRS or geo redundant storages. Like geo redundant storage says that it has 6 copies of data. Okay, one in primary and another in secondary. Okay, secondary. So, but a catch is here is like you'll be charged with the data at rest in the secondary location plus the egress data. So what happens is like in primary for copying data you were never charged. Okay, so even in LRS or in ZRS, but when you select a GRS, when it happens over another geography, okay, it uses express route. That's why there are charges are there. So you will be charged with egress data. I mean the traffic which is coming out of, or data which is coming out of your primary and entering your secondary, and you will be charged on the data which is stored, the egress data which is stored in the secondary locations as well. So that's a catch. So for accessing a storage account, you have something called as primary and secondary key. Okay, you can access with either a primary key or a secondary key. Okay, and there are advantage why we have two different keys, and we have different types of the storages which we have discussed earlier, right? And we have premium page blobs only, and ZR zone redundant blobs only kind of features also on storage account. Look over to it, and you can Google out and look into them as well. And we have already created a storage account. Okay, so you can create a storage account using your partial module as well, but in order to have your partial to run your queries using Azure commandlets, then you need to have Azure.storage commandlet stored in them, okay, or installed in it. So when you install Azure SDKs for partial, it would install them by default. But if you're using a old partial versions, then or old updates if you have with respect to your Azure SDKs, then it would probably won't have your storage SDKs as well, or storage commandlets included in the partial. So you can see like you have Azure Storage. These all are Azure Storage commandlets which you have. Okay, so you need to have these particular commandlets installed, or SDKs or client SDKs installed on it before running Azure commands, Azure Storage commands. And we have something called as like we have a lot number of storage access tools. Basically, why we talk about storage access tools is like if you have a VM, okay, if you want to add a disk, or create add a disk, or you need to transfer a disk or copy a disk from one location to another location. Like for an example, there's a scenario like you have created a VM in South Central US. Okay, and now you have and that's basically a classic storage, and you have shut down that particular VM, and you have you have created a VHD out of that, and you have all of the data in that particular VM. Okay, you need to take up this VHD to a new location. Okay, and you can only do that using Azure tools. Okay, AZCopy, using AZCopy tool, or you can use Azure Storage Explorer. Okay, so Azure Storage Explorer is it's a client, Windows client application. You can also install in your own PCs and run it. I'll show how it would be, like what are the beneficials of these Azure tools. Okay, and why it's like for copying of a huge amount of data, yeah, it would be useful. And if you want to create a table without any triggering a REST API, you can see in this particular you can see that this particular, like, this is a storage explorer, and I'll show the storage explorer. Yeah, once it loads up, you can use Visual Studio as well for checking out what kind of data is there in your storage. Okay, so for that I just go to my Visual Studio, I open something called as what Let this Visual Studio load up that one. Oh, okay, so you have this stuff in Azure Storage Explorer. So this is from Microsoft. You have other tools as well, AZCopy, other tools. So you can see that I have my VSDev subscription. Inside that I have created a new storage account, the Azure Guest STG right now, right? So this Azure STG, the whatever the primary key or the second key which you can see there, you can see it here as well, name, type, and then you have the primary and secondary key to access data in it. And if you're developing an application, you would be interested in getting the connection string as you get for a SQL server as well, right? Same, you have complete connection string which you can copy and use it in your application to trigger calls onto storage. So you have blob containers. Okay, so blob containers will have containers. Okay, containers, and then in that container you can have your blob. So you create a blob container first, b container apps. So you have blob containers, and inside this particular blob container actually you can drag any kind of file. So the file features can be like, it can be anything. Since by like blobs are, it can store any kind of objects, right? It should be, comfortably can store any kind of photos. If I go and even irrespective of its PNG file, or it's any kind of file, like it's my JPEG or docs also. It can store any docs as well. Okay, so since it's a blob storage, and it can store any kind of objects, so you can see that it's like I'm able to store any kind of data in it, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's a document file or it's a PNG file. Irrespective of nature of extensions, we can store up anything in a blob storage, but you need to create a container to store those files. So we have something called as file shares as well. Okay, file share is a file server creation. You can create it from the portal as well. Okay, or you can do the same from here. And you have something called as queue. Okay, so queue is used in case of you want to put up some messages in the queue, and the messages can be read by any kind of applications. So those kind of stuffs are, we use queues. And we have some other interesting stuff is called as tables. Okay, so table would be similar to it would store unstructured data in it. Okay, and if you want to see a certain example which I created, okay, which I have already, this particular table, and I've created a table here in this particular storage account, my Cloud Shell storage account. So you can see certain tables, like I have something called as metric capacity blob table storage. So you can see that there's a partition key, row key, timestamp, and these all properties are there. And at runtime, even if all this data is there, you can go and add a particular one more property as well. So that's what is the benefit of can be an email ID. Okay, you can go and insert this particular into this property. Into this particular storage account, and it will successfully create a property, and from next time onwards when your application writes, it can add one more property, or email ID property as well. You doesn't need to drop this table and create a table again and push all the data which was there earlier into this table and then carry on your work. So that's our benefit of Azure Storage Explorer or Azure Storage. And you can use Azure Storage Explorer to view the content in the Azure Storage, and you can add accounts, your subscription, and then connect to your once you had added an account, you can actually you can actually check out storages which are there in your Azure account. Okay, and you can see something called as Azure China, Azure Germany, Azure US government, and custom environment. Okay, so Azure China, Germany, and US government are these all are specific private stamps from Azure to these countries. China did want to store up their data into in other parts of the world, but we don't have from India has any concern about that. So China may have their government or any other confidential data which are it doesn't want to push its own data to somewhere in other part of the world. So they would be they have acquired a private stamp of their Azure in China. So that's what is Azure China, and same as Germany got, and US government has a different stamp of Azure itself. So soon you're gonna see something for us from India. Indian government will also have a different stamp of Azure for themselves as well. So you can create a custom environment where actually if you're creating something kind of a hybrid environment where you have your own private data center, okay, and it's coming up. These ideas are coming up, and where you can set up, you can take a software from Azure, okay, which actually can run a data center as a whole, and you have a big huge hardware. You can just take a software license from Azure, and you can run your own DC or kind of Azure in your own environment or whatever resources you have. For that, you have something called as custom environment. Okay, so these all Azure accounts you can add to your Azure Storage Explorer, and then view all the files which are there in your storage account. Or you can get a SaaS key if Archana or Maddie have their own storage account, and they want to give me an access to me so that I can write up some files onto that, then they can give some shared access signature, okay, and shared access signature or connection string. So shared access signature is this: like you go to your storage account, you click this shared access signature, and you can see what kind of permission you can give, whether you want to give permission only to the blobs or only to the storage, or what kind of resource types can you give to containers or not, and for what time to what time. It has life time or expiry time as well, and you can generate a SaaS. You can allow protocols, what kind of protocols by which he can access this particular storage account. So it would generate SaaS key. Okay, you can copy the SaaS key and go ahead and click use a SaaS key, or you can you can put this SaaS key account label. You can put stages something secret one. Okay. Oh, sorry. If you have connection for that, you do that. Or if you have SaaS URI, you just paste the SaaS URI, and you're good to go. And you can click connect, and it would be connected. Since it's the same account, that's why maybe it's seeing no protocol provided. Or okay, that's a SaaS token. Let's go and access a blob service with this. Yes, the protocol is that HTTPS, and we click HTTPS next, and you are connected. So this is a different way of connecting to a different kind of storage. Or you can actually go, if you have only a username, storage account, and name key, like you have something called as my storage account name is this one, or this one. Okay. Have this, and I can go and access. That I can have keys, right? Primary key and second key. Yes, I have the key. At default, Windows use HTTPS for making call to this. Click next. Yes, again you are able to connect it to these resources. So you can see that. So whatever resources I am able to access, which would be visible on this particular dashboard, and you can connect to those databases. That's what is Azure Storage Explorer works. And the same thing you can work without installing Azure Storage Explorer. Since Azure Storage Explorer is more efficient performance, and if you don't want to load up your Visual Studio with this stuff as well, you can go with that. So Visual Studio also has something called as Cloud Explorer, where you can see something called as big data, those stuff, data lake analytics as well. Okay, or you can have your storage accounts also, you can see, or you can see your website data files inside your web services. Okay, I've created something called as function app. Okay, Azure Functions, that also you can see, and you can see app service plans. You will know further what are app service plans as well. So for now, just see that I'm able to access storage account here in my Server Explorer also. For that, you just need to authenticate your subscription in it, and you're good to go. You can see all the stuff. You can edit the same stuff which you were doing in the Like you can go to tables, and the tables have data in it. Okay. So inside the tables, you can create your own table in them. Let's take your rank, something called like this. And once you storage open, and you can open them. So you can add properties, the same which you were doing in Storage Explorer. You can add property, like you can give partition key, row key are by default. You need to give unique partition. The combination of partition key and row key should be unique. Something called as email ID. I just give, fill up with the string data. Okay, and then okay. Okay, so the combination of partition and row key should be unique. Okay, and that's what is this one. You have 1 1, right? You can't have 1 1 again. You can see that. So I can't put 1, and partition row key can be same, but I can't put it because they're same. If I make it 2 and I don't add any other property as well, I can still push the values. You can see that you don't have, for the second order row, you doesn't have email ID, but you can still push your data. That's what is structured data or NoSQL databases, which we call the features of a NoSQL databases. So with that said, so the Azure Storage Explorer, like I have talked about all of this, right? SAS key, you can add a storage account, a lot of stuff. The same stuff fits in written format here. And we have Azure Ask Command Line tool. Okay, so Ask Command Line tool is a partial tool, command line interface partial tool, which actually you can do all the stuff which you were doing with the portal. You can do with the AZCopy tools, and so the latest version of AZCopy is available on the net, and you can go and you need to like you would call up everything like AZCopy /source, and you will give the URL of your container, and you will give a destination. You'll give a source key, destination key, and a pattern, and then it would copy a file from your local destination, and this particular text file it will copy from the source to destination, whatever you have mentioned here. Okay, and with the key, whatever you have, you need to give a primary key from source and destination key from source, from destination. Okay, so that's how this particular AZCopy client will get an authorized access on reading a data from your source and putting a data into your destination. So this particular AZCopy command line tools or interface are useful when you do a lot of operations, like you want to copy a 20 TB of, like a 10 TB of VHD from your one storage account to another storage account. You use this, or you use this particular command line interface AZCopy CLI, either when you are writing up your CLI commands, Azure CLI commands, or when you are writing up partial scripts. Okay, in that cases you're going to use AZCopy. Okay, and you can browse through it. What are the other options of Storage Explorers you have, and how to use AZCopy command line, this particular link.